All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here, talking real music in real time for a few real people out there just like you and just like me. So, cruising around the thrift store circuit here in Southwest Florida this weekend. That's what I like to do. That's about as crazy of an activity that I'm up for. And I look through the record bins. My wife tends to look through the craft section of the store. And look what I found. This is the coolest. Did anyone go see the Jesus Revolution movie? Because if you did, you probably know about Love Song because they're in the movie. And what was it? Pastor Chuck Smith made them the soundtrack of his church. And they launched the early days of Christian contemporary music, just a really fantastic band. And the album is in great shape. In fact, not only did I get Love Song, I mean, somebody must have unloaded a whole bunch of cool records that they didn't want anymore. Then I got this, which is really good. And by the way, check this out. The inner sleeve, really good shape. The album is just pristine. So if you're a record collector, this kind of stuff is amazing. And two really great bands that kind of sound a bit like Crosby, Stills, and Nash, America. There's some twanging going on, so it's kind of country-ish at times. It's very rootsy and very organic. And these people were unfiltered. They were actually talking about Jesus. So if you haven't seen the movie Jesus Revolution, Kelsey Grammer plays the part of Chuck Smith, and it's just a really good movie. Makes you feel good, and you get to relive those early days of CCM when it wasn't super commercial, and people were doing it because they actually loved the Lord. So yeah, great to find those albums. That was a lot of fun. And you know what's fun is watching like the whole Rock and Roll Hall of Fame institution kind of implode a bit between what's happening when it comes to the nominations and how that goes down, and then the winners. And honestly, there was only one group that I thought should have gotten through, and that band is over my shoulder, by the way, as a tribute. And I'm talking about the Spinners, one of the mainstays of the Philly sound, and they had one of the great producers of all time, Tom Bell, and they were great singers, they were great performers, and those songs are just mint. But other than that band or that group, Sheryl Crow, is like, what? That's about as good as it gets after that. But in the news, Bernie Taupin, right, is blasting Jann Wenner. And Jann Wenner, of course, deserves it because all these people are essentially hypocrites. It's just funny to watch. So Bernie Taupin, of course, who is Elton John's collaborator, brain, songwriter, has pretty much carried Elton on his shoulders for many, many years. If you didn't know, Elton typically doesn't write lyrics, and Bernie does. It's a 56-year collaboration. He actually described it as a marriage, a second marriage. And that's, I don't even want to go there, with Elton John and marriage, I'm not going to go there. Anyway, Bernie didn't miss the opportunity to call out Rock and Roll Hall of Fame co-founder Jann Wenner, who was recently dismissed as its board member after his recent insensitive comments about female and black performers in his 2023 book, The Masters: Conversations with Dylan, Lennon, Jagger, Townsend, Garcia, Bono, and Springsteen. I wonder if that's going to sell. If that book ends up selling a lot, then people are going to accuse the people who are buying the book of being racist and insensitive. And why would you give money to this guy, Jann Wenner? Now, it's interesting because this class of people likes to harp on comments by Eric Clapton that were made, I don't know, like 50 years ago, and to hold that up to see, here's a pattern. And this guy basically comes out and says all of this super negative, shall I say, racist and whatever commentary. And typically, I don't like to go down this road, but this guy really stepped in it. He says here, it's not that they're not creative geniuses. Okay, well, that's good. And he's talking about women and African American performers. It's not that they're inarticulate. Although, go have a deep conversation with Grace Slick or Janis Joplin. I don't know. I've seen Grace Slick, and she typically in interviews, and she's typically very articulate and interesting and funny. And Grace Slick is one of those people who says, or said a few years ago, that old people should probably not be in rock and roll. And for the most part, I think she's right. I think some people expire before other people do. But Grace, I think she called it right. Some people, of course, transcend age, and they tend to age better than others. But it depends how you carry yourself. He also threw Janis Joplin under the bus. So Janis hasn't been around, for how many years now? Like 50 or so. And it's kick them when they're up, kick them when they're down, kick them when they're stiff, kick them all around, according to Don Henley. And he goes on to talk about Joni Mitchell. She was not a philosopher of rock and roll. She didn't, in my mind, meet that test, not by her work. You mean the number 9 rated guitarist didn't meet the test, Jann? You mean you didn't influence that list of guitarists? Get out of here. Anyway, it says not by the other interviews she did. So he watched a few interviews, and he concluded that these people were not philosophers of rock. Elaborating on why there were no black performers featured in his book, Wenner continued, of the black artists, Stevie Wonder, genius, right? Yeah, I say he's a genius. But he goes on to say, I suppose when you use a word as broad as masters, the fault is using that word. Maybe Marvin Gaye or Curtis Mayfield. I mean, they just didn't articulate at that level. So did he need somebody to have a conversation with, or did he need, it's just bizarre. It's like these people aren't auditioning to be his friend. They're just people he's supposed to talk to get their perspective. And to put a book together like this called The Masters, he's implying that only white guys are the masters. And so these are the people, by the way, who will call out the people more on the right side of the spectrum and call them every name in the book if they say something a little bit insensitive. Or these people will construe something and say it's a dog whistle. I love when they do that. Well, that's a dog whistle. That person saying that they want to induct like the Guess Who into the Hall of Fame, or America into the Hall of Fame, or Jethro Tull. Those are 3 bands that aren't in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. I'm the problem because these guys are older white dudes. I'm the problem for suggesting that. So you can't suggest it anymore. By the way, who did I say was the only band that deserved to get in this time? The Spinners, right? And what color are they? And I didn't do it because of that. I've always loved the Spinners. They have a great sound. The production value is off the hook, off the charts, into the sky. One of the great producers. And these guys performed like nobody's business on top of it. Great live performers. And those records, you had to have that level of talent to make those records sound the way they do. So, I like the Spinners better than Jethro Tull. Seriously. I like them better than the Guess Who. And I do like the Guess Who a lot, at least the old band, not this current thing that's going around. And so any of those bands that I mentioned, yeah, I like the Spinners better, but that means they should put together a better list. So the Spinners are somewhere in the middle of the pack, and everybody gets in. That's why I think there should be a different institution created for all of the bands that haven't been put into the Hall of Fame. Foreigner is not getting in because apparently they had a fight with Jann Wenner or somebody. Well, Jan's not there anymore, so put Foreigner in, right? Kansas is not in. Okay, these are more mainstream. In the case of Kansas, All-American. In the case of Foreigner, you had a mix of Brits and Americans, hence the name Foreigner. But there are other bands. You could talk about Styx if you wanted to. At least the Dennis DeYoung, say the late 70s version of Styx, probably should be in there, or at least considered. And there are others, you know. I mean, you probably have your favorite band that hasn't been inducted into the Hall of Fame. I also think about Jim Croce all the time. Jim Croce, I mean, he was on cloud 11 when that plane crashed, and his music was all over the radio. He was a working class hero, but again, he's the wrong demographic, and for whatever reason, he and his sidekick Maury, they just weren't talented enough, apparently, for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which is ridiculous. I mean, he's not here anymore, so he can't offend you. He's dead. He's not going to offend you. It's like been, 50 years? So put him in there. He doesn't meet the criteria. Although Sheryl Crow does, though. Sheryl Crow, fantastic, right? Was it Missy Elliott? Absolutely. Jim Croce? No. So anyway, Jann Wenner embodies everything that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame seems to be against. So, you know, kicking him off the board, why not penalize him more somehow? Can't you make his life miserable? Because that's typically what happens to people who step out of line and say something maybe that people misconstrue. In this case, it was very blunt, and there was really no misconstruing what Jann Wenner said. And good on Bernie Taupin for basically making fun of Jann Wenner during his Hall of Fame induction as a songwriter, and one of the great songwriters, really, of the last, 50 or 60 years. One of the better ones. If it wasn't for Bernie, you know, every time Elton John made a comeback, typically he had to call Bernie and say, hey, let's write some songs, or can you write some songs for me? I think of Reg Strikes Back when that album came out. Too Low for Zero. I'm pretty sure that was Bernie back in the saddle again, writing. And so Elton needs Bernie, and apparently there's new music coming out. And when that music drops, one radio station out there will be playing it for sure. And that's Modern Retro Radio, modernretrofm.com. Definitely a great radio station. It's an internet radio station, and you should check it out. I'll put info in the description of this video. Again, for collectors, this was a lot of fun this weekend, finding a love song. And this is always good news, because it is the good news, right? And it's great music. So, yeah, if you do any thrifting, drop me a note. I'd like to hear about your experience. If not, then you can live vicariously through my somewhat interesting but pretty lengthy videos. Again, thanks for watching. God bless everyone. Please pray for peace in the Middle East. That's what we should do. Pray for peace. We don't like war. War is bad. It's good for nothing, according to Edwin Starr.